This is the Sigma 14-24 wide-angle art lens. 14 millimeters?
Aren't you tired of the drama? You use your words like they are knives. I don't need that type of drama and trying to be tough all the damn time. You try to make yourself feel better by taking me down. Once I fell, but now I'm strong. I'm ready for the rematch. Shoot me down, don't you know I get up? Yeah, baby, I will fight. No, there ain't nothing stopping me. I'm bulletproof, I won't fall. I'm bulletproof, go on and shoot me down. I will always get up again.
All right, let's go ahead and talk about the lens itself. So here's the Sigma 14-24 wide-angle art lens, and if you have used an art lens before, then it has pretty much all the characteristics that you would expect from an art lens. It's got that beautifully designed body that's also weather resistant, a very quiet stepping motor for silent autofocusing, built-in lens hood, smooth focus and zoom rings, an autofocus lock button that you can assign a different function, and of course, that 14-24 millimeter focal range at a constant f2.8, baby. Now, when you zoom with the Sigma lens, you don't see the barrel of the lens pop out. In fact, it kind of does it internally. So here it is over here, it just kind of moves ever so slightly inside the barrel. Where with the Sony lens, the barrel actually extends. It's not necessarily a big deal, but if you are putting that Sony lens on a gimbal and you want to zoom in and out, then you're gonna have to rebalance the gimbal to accommodate the shift of weight from the lens. One of the advantages with a wider focal length is that you get to hold the camera closer to your face. And if you are in a tight spot, like in a car or an airplane, and you need to get the shot, then a wider focal length is just gonna be better to use. Now, I will say a big difference between the Sigma lens and the Sony 16-35 is the front part of the lens. The Sigma lens has this bulbous front lens to it. I'm assuming it's because of the 14 millimeter focal length. That's kind of annoying, especially if you want to put a ND filter in front of the lens. You're not going to be able to shoot at low apertures in bright conditions. You're just going to have to increase your f-stop. Not necessarily a bad thing, but if you are interested in getting this lens, then keep that in mind. Now, as far as chromatic aberration goes, I couldn't really see any at all. In fact, here are some photos that I took of some leaves and the sky, which is a great way to see some chromatic aberration. And if we zoom in all the way, I don't really see any of that purple fringe around the edges of the leaves. If you really pixel peep, you might see some, but at first glance, you don't see any chromatic aberration at all. Good job, Sigma. Now keep in mind, with a wide angle lens, there tends to be distortion, and so you want to watch out for the corners and you want to see how well it distorts the image in the center of your composition. So for example, my hand will probably be way distorted when placed close to the lens. Look at that, it's giant. I have giant hands now. But when it comes to distortion with the Sigma 14-24 art lens, there is slight distortion, especially when it comes to straight lines, but definitely at a minimum. So we have the Sigma 14-24 wide-angle lens on the A7 III, and we're just gonna do a quick autofocus test where I'm just gonna go close to the lens and then I'm gonna go away from the lens, and we're just gonna see how it performs. And I've set my autofocus area to zone, and the zone area will be on the top part of the composition. And so here we go. Huh? Huh? Now I realize that most of the autofocusing processing is within the camera body itself, not necessarily the lens, but the communication between the lens and the camera body also plays a big role. And with the Sigma 14-24 wide-angle art lens, I would say it's pretty darn close to the performance of the Sony 16-35 G Master lens. Now a question that you might ask is that if this lens is set to autofocus, then what's the motor noise like? Like, is it gonna be noisy? Can you hear it? Well, let's test it out. Okay, so now I have my microphone pointed directly on top of the Sigma 14-24 because we want to hear if there's any noise when it comes to autofocus in video. So here we go. I couldn't really hear anything from this end. Like, I'm about 1.5 feet away from the lens, and I'm not hearing any motor noise when it comes to autofocus. Now, which lens do I think is better? The Sigma 14-24 or the Sony 16-35? I don't know. I already have the Sony lens and I absolutely love it, and it just works. But I did pay a pretty penny for that lens because it's a G Master lens. But if this was an option at the time that I was looking for a wide angle lens, then I most likely would have gotten the Sigma 14-24. Now, do I think 14 millimeters is too wide? Not necessarily. I mean, I actually quite like vlogging at 14 millimeters because it just makes the entire composition just look bigger than life. Again, just keep in mind about the distortion in the corners and in the center of your frame, but I think it's totally fine if you're like 18 inches or 24 inches away from your face. Then again, at 14 millimeters, it just looks really cool. Now, I will say that the Sigma 14-24 wide lens is lighter than the Sony 16-35 G Master lens. I'm not exactly sure why. There might be more elements within the Sony lens itself. Maybe it has to do with the exterior of the body, but it's just a lighter lens, and I much prefer using that to vlog because, well, let's face it, I'm not very strong. And so the lighter the camera setup, then the easier it is for me to vlog. Now, that's not to say that the Sony 16-35 G Master lens is not a good lens at all. It totally is. Like, it works. Like, it's my workhorse lens. It just works. I paid a lot for that lens, but I expect gear that costs that much to work when I need it to work. But sometimes at 16 millimeters, the shot isn't as wide as I'd like it to be. And even though there's a 2 millimeter difference, there's a difference. I mean, 14 and 16, there's gonna be a difference. With every lens, there's gonna be pros and cons, but with the Sigma 14-24, there are a lot more pros than there are cons, especially when it comes to price. If you are in the Sony ecosystem and you want a wide angle lens to vlog, and you're considering getting the Sony 16-35 G Master lens, well, that lens is gonna cost you $2,100 US. Like, that's a lot of money. But with the Sigma lens, this costs $1,399 US, nearly a difference of $1,000. So if you do have a Sony full frame camera and you're looking to get a wide angle lens to vlog for your landscape photography, for whatever, then I would definitely consider getting the Sigma 14-24 because, well, one, it's cheaper, but two, it's wider, it's just as good as far as image quality goes, if not a little bit better, and you get to save $1,000 in your pocket. Go get some tacos or something. And in fact, if I were to start all over again and I wanted to get a wide angle lens for my Sony A7 III, then I probably would have got the Sigma 14-24 wide angle lens. Well, let me know in the comments below what you think of the Sigma 14-24 wide angle art lens. Would you get it? If you have the 16-35 G Master lens, would you sell that to get the Sigma 14-24 art lens? Because I'm kind of tempted to do so. But that's it, folks. I'm out of here. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Laters.